You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Tuesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Or it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Apologies first and foremost for not having a Monday podcast. I couldn't, aside from the press conference, could not get out of bed. Not because of any of the earlier depression stuff, but because physically I was on the physically unable to perform list. Had a kind of a very bad back situation. But we're back today, not drugged up anymore, feeling a heck of a lot better, so that's good. Off of that, went from doubtful to probable overnight. Anyway, so we are back today, and in segment 2, we have Anthony Treash from Pro Football Focus joining us. I've already recorded that interview. You are going to absolutely love what he had to say. I can tell you that. He has a kind of shocking outlook on Michigan. Put it that way. So stay tuned for what he has to say there. But first, let's just kind of get into the basics here of what is about to happen here, and that's Michigan's entering Big Ten play. I know that there's a lot of people out there. It's been a whole thing in the last 3 games. I've seen some pretty good retorts, however, about Michigan's non-conference schedule. I've got one of my own, and then I'll add the ones that I've kind of heard here. The one that I have when people talk about, like, well, Michigan is, they've been beating up on bad teams. I mean, this is the most that Michigan scored point differential-wise since 1947. I know this has probably been the worst schedule since then or before then. But I would be more concerned about Michigan at this point, having played nobody, if it was like, think about what happened in 2013 after Michigan played Notre Dame. If Michigan would have gone out and played Akron and UConn as if those two teams were on their even plane, then that becomes concerning. They haven't done that yet, right? They've played everyone like they are a lesser than team. Obviously, this week we will finally get like a real understanding of what Michigan is, playing Maryland. Now, Maryland, although 3-0, who knows what they actually are. Defensively, they have historically not been great. I believe right now they're actually in a decent spot defensively, but they haven't exactly played a murderer's row of teams either, right? So that is where things kind of digress to some degree, right? So, SMU, that's a tough team. I believe that they gave up some yards there. Nothing crazy, though. But Maryland, 88th in defense even still, in total defense. So what they have given up, they gave up 27 to SMU, 21 to Charlotte, who's not exactly a good team, and 10 to Buffalo, which, again, not a very good team. So it's their first real test in a way as well. But as far as total defense is concerned, they've given up 268 against Buffalo. That felt pretty good for them, right? 388 to Charlotte. Okay, that's fine. But then they gave up a lot of passing yards to SMU, 369, 151 rushing yards, 520 total. So is Michigan better than SMU? I mean, I would imagine. That was a home game. They're coming to the big house. One of the other things that I wanted to mention when it comes to the schedule, and this is not my own thing, but I think that this makes a heck of a lot of sense. No one's saying, I saw the question posed, why is no one saying this about Alabama? And, my first thought is, well, because Alabama went on the road and played Texas. But Alabama has 4 non-conference games to Michigan's 3. Yes, that's a pretty big non-conference game to go and play not only a Power 5 team, but play one that's supposed to be pretty good in Texas. I mean, I know Texas is back every year, all of that stuff, but at the same time, that's still a big one. But when you look at who Alabama plays in its non-conference outside of that, because if you consider Texas to be one of the 9 conference foes, essentially, Alabama plays Utah State, Louisiana, and they played Louisiana Monroe, and then they play FCS school Austin Peay. So which is better or worse? I mean, Utah State is their only win is over UConn. Otherwise, they lost not only to Alabama but also to FCS school Weber State, 35-7. They got destroyed at home. That's not a very good team right now. The Utah State. Louisiana Monroe is 1-2. They lost to Texas. They beat FCS school Nicholls State and lost to Alabama. Austin Peay, I can't even look it up from this particular site that I go to. So here's the thing when it comes to like weak schedules and people hold it against Michigan, blah, blah, blah. It's all going to play out in the end. And if Michigan goes undefeated, then they're certainly worthy. If they're 11-1, 12-1 or whatever, I guess it depends on how those other teams in the Big Ten end up doing, right? Certainly you can go undefeated and still be suspect. I think back to Notre Dame in 2012, right? They had Oklahoma, Michigan, all kinds of teams that ended up not being that good that year. So it's all suspect, right? Until we get to the end of the season. So to brag about how Michigan's doing, that's okay. I don't know. But to also recognize that this is a team that's doing what it's supposed to do, you can't take that away from Michigan. They're doing what they're supposed to do. You know, it's not a situation where they're going out there and they're looking okay. They have looked close to flawless. There have been issues. Certainly the offensive line, I don't think it's as dire as people have made it out to be. The pass protection, obviously it hasn't been quite up to the same par that you would hope. But you know, usually Michigan offensive lines take about 4 games before they get themselves figured out. Last year, I don't believe was too much of an exception to that. It hasn't been like this crazy dire situation there. I'd like to see more in the defensive pass rush. Want to see it look more like it did in week 1 when it felt like, okay. But teams are getting rid of the ball mostly pretty quickly. So, and the pass rush, they might not be getting home, but they're affecting the plays, right? I mean, obviously, UConn did not have a good time when it came to passing the ball. It was 24 yards through the air. I mean, you can't ask for much better than that, you know? Michigan is in the upper echelon at the moment when it comes to not only total defense, but pass defense. Number 3 in total defense, passing defense. Michigan is number 3 as well, averaging 91.3 yards a game. But it went way down after this last game, but they're about to get severely tested this week when it comes to that, because Maryland passing offense, it's clearly going to be very good. They're number 20 in the country. They're averaging 310 yards through the air every game. The only team that Michigan will probably see that's even better than that, at least only one I think that's ranked ahead of them at this moment, is Ohio State. So it's going to be interesting to see how Michigan handles Maryland. We'll understand a lot more about the Michigan defense this coming week, and then we'll know a lot more about the Michigan offense the next week against Iowa. All right, we've got Anthony Treash for 14 full minutes, so let's throw it over to my not so great audio because I just did not have a good audio solution. I was not at home, not in the studio. You will hear and see it, but everything is still legible. That's the important thing, right? Is that it's there. It doesn't have to always be top notch. And that said, I mean, it's always kind of weird here on the show anyway, because of the fact that, I've got all kinds of events and stuff surrounding me here as it is. But before we do move on, from cringing at the pump to getting an eye-opening check at your favorite restaurant, inflation is hitting us all where it hurts, and it really hurts. That's why I started using Upside. Upside is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out. With every purchase, I'm earning cash back thanks to Upside. To get started, go ahead and download the free Get Upside app. Use the promo code LOCKED and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Next, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. Check in at the business, pay as usual with a credit card or debit card, and get paid. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back with Upside. Upside users are earning more than $1 million every week. That's probably why they have a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. Download the free Upside app and use the promo code LOCK to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using the promo code LOCKED.
And a little change of scenery for me here. As you can see, we'll be back in the studio later. But for segment number 2, we are bringing in one of our favorite guests, and that is Anthony Treash from Pro Football Focus to discuss where Michigan has been through 3 weeks. We didn't get to talk to you after week 2. So Anthony, welcome as always. Super excited to hear your thoughts on what we've seen from Michigan in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, as expected, right? I mean, lesser competition, dominant play, high scoring for Michigan, low scoring for their opponent. I'm not sure if my opinions would have changed too much week over week, just given what the level of competition. But I mean, I still think that, as everybody knows, I was pretty high on Michigan coming into the season. But, each time I go back and watch them, I think, man, maybe I'm a little even lower than the public is, or not the public, just from my previous opinion on him, because my expectations for him are sky high right now. So, I mean, so far, so good for, really every single facet of play for the Michigan Wolverines.
Well, we have to start with the obvious one here, and that is J.J. McCarthy. Now, last time we talked, he had only been out there for a handful of snaps, went 4 for 4 at that time. The last 2 weeks, he has been the starter, and I believe he's your number 2 rated quarterback, period, at this moment. Now he's starting to get starters minutes, kind of, because obviously he's not playing in the second half very much there. But what have you seen from JJ? How do you think he is performing in that level? And with that in mind, what do you expect from him once the competition gets a little tougher based off of what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, the grade speaks for itself. Like you said, one of the highest graded quarterbacks in college football right now. And, him being the starter, it was inevitable. If for people that have listened before, they obviously know that I've been in the Team JJ camp since, going back to the middle of last season. I really do think that he's going to be a superstar. And just given what we've seen from him, I mean, he's done everything Michigan could have dreamed for. I actually sent out a tweet. I was just watching him again, going through every single throw. He has 0 negatively graded plays so far this season. And I know the teams Michigan's faced have been bad, right? I mean, there's some of the worst in the FBS, but I don't care if you're playing, an FCS school and you don't have a negatively graded throw. That's impressive. That's hard to do. I mean, he is playing borderline perfect football right now. And he's shown every single tool that you could possibly want in a quarterback. So, I think there's 0 really flaws that he has shown so far. So I think at this point, you have to think that, if he sustains this level of play, it's not absolutely crazy to say that Michigan can't win the national championship, or, JJ McCarthy's the best quarterback in college football, because what he's shown so far, like I said, is borderline perfect. So, I do think that that's where my expectations have kind of, I would say, slightly increased for Michigan. Because right now, if you had to say, you want to field an offense this weekend, you could pick any offense in college football, which one you picking? I'm probably leaning in Michigan's direction of, all 131 FBS schools. I mean, there's just so much talent there, and, JJ's kind of leading the pack. So I'm excited to see what he can do against some, Big Ten competition. Obviously, they got Maryland this week, and, I think they're 16 and a half point favorites last I saw. I think they probably cover that number. I really do think that JJ is going to sustain this level of play. Now, is he not going to have a negatively graded throw or play at all this season? No. I mean, he's going to have some mistakes here and there, but I think we're going to see continued established elite play from him throughout the course of the season. And again, I don't want to look too far ahead, but that Ohio State game, I think it could be even better than it was last year. I think it's going to be, a fireworks show, kind of the 4th of July in late November there. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the year for him as they get into conference play.
Now, obviously not everything is good, right? I know it looks pretty much that way when you look at Michigan at the moment, because everything's firing on high cylinder, pretty much all cylinders there. What do you look at and say, maybe there's a cause for concern here, if there is any?
Yeah, I mean, offensively, I really don't I can't find any right now. And again, it's because the level of competition, it doesn't necessarily expose those vulnerabilities, right? But even the fact that we haven't really seen anything, that's where I'm kind of leaning towards, okay, maybe this is a legit group, right? This isn't just, bad competition, just seeing what they've been continuously doing. I think, maybe, I guess there's still an element of unknown, right? Just given the level of play. So, I mean, it's hard to pick out a vulnerability. I mean, even the plays where JJ has to do some stuff off structure. He's looked, I mean, like I said, borderline perfect. I mean, he has not made any mistakes. He had a touchdown, and forget, it might have been this past week, it might have been week 2, but he had a touchdown where he was under pressure, he was flushed out the pocket, and he kept his eyes downfield. It looked like he was going to scramble. They had a spy on him. It was going to be a 3-yard gain, if that. He kept his eyes downfield, and before he hit the line of scrimmage, he popped up off platform throw and nailed a touchdown, in a little hole spot against the defense. So, I mean, it was that play right there kind of, to me, speaks volumes about the quarterback he is. So, maybe the offensive line isn't, necessarily up to that, the moral award standards, but, I still think, just given the talent that they have on that side of the ball, I don't think there really is a vulnerability there that I would be too worried about. If anything, it's just an injury pops up. So, I mean, offensively, there's little there that I would be worried about heading into the season. Defensively, I think that's when you could possibly say, well, maybe they could have an off day. I guess if you had to pick anything, they don't necessarily have, I would say, that superstar type of talent, right? We've talked a lot about, they don't have that Aiden Hutchinson. I don't think that they do have that type of player, but everything that we've seen so far, it's just nobody's played bad on that side of the ball, in my opinion, right? I mean, it's just been a big rotation, obviously with the first and second half guys, just with the blowouts, but everybody's made a pretty significant impact in their play. So again, it's hard to pick a vulnerability. Just, again, I think the competition they have faced has obviously played a part in that, but I think that also speaks volumes about the talent that they do have.
Now, of course, there's a couple big games coming up for Michigan now, moving on into Big Ten play. So with that in mind, I mean, what do you think this, you've got 2 games these next 2 weeks that, one of them probably going to test Michigan's defense and a Maryland team. And then the next week it's going to be Iowa, which has yet to discover what offense is, but clearly has a really good defense. What do you expect coming out of those next 2 games? And how could there be any, everyone expects Michigan to win. Could Michigan be upset in either of those?
I would be very, very surprised if they were. I really do like Maryland. I like some of the talent that they do have. I think Talia Tagovailoa is honestly one of the more underappreciated quarterbacks in college football. I thought he was last year, and I still think he is. And I think that could be a little bit of a test for Michigan's defense. So that's kind of the battle there that I'm looking forward to watching in that outing. But I would be very surprised if either of the 2 teams could get there. I think for Michigan, it's just kind of, getting heat on Talia. I mean, they definitely have offensive weapons on that side of the ball, but I don't think that there's enough there to really kind of, be on the same level as Michigan. And with Iowa, like you said, they still haven't discovered what offense really is. And that's not really happening this year. I mean, they just don't have the players, right? The offensive line's an issue, particularly in pass protection. The quarterback obviously is a big issue. Just can't, accuracy and decision-making, it just really isn't there. There's no explosive offense to speak of. Wide receiver, they lost their top 2 guys, Charlie Jones, Tyron Tracy, and Charlie Jones is now performing at an elite level with the Purdue Boilermakers. And because he has an actual quarterback for a change there. So, I don't expect much to change on the Iowa front. They have a defense, but, I think just given the weapon and the depth at that position, at the skill position weapons for Michigan, it's going to be hard for that Michigan or that Iowa defense to kind of contend there. So I would be very surprised if, either one of them came close to beating Michigan. But I think at least on the bright side, I think Maryland does present just a little bit of a challenge for the defense, just to get their feet wet a little bit, just given that they really haven't faced a potent offense yet. This isn't the best offense in college football, but it's a very solid one. So I guess that's kind of I would say, the matchup there that would at least give us some light into what kind of group that they actually will have, I think, for the rest of the year.
So what if I'm hearing you right, based off of everything you've said thus far to this point? I will see you in Inglewood, California at SoFi Stadium in January. Michigan's going to win everything. I'm super excited. Okay, maybe it's not. They play the games for a reason, but the offense in particular, it's like you said, lots of reason for excitement. I'm surprised you're quite as high on them as you are, because I haven't heard anyone say that they would take Michigan's offense overall. But you know what? Let's keep that energy going, Anthony. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, so before the season, I made a CFP prediction. I don't even know if PFF College tweeted this one out. And out of everything that they tweet out that I say, I think that would probably be the one I wish they would have. I had the CFP prediction. I had Bama 1, Michigan 2, USC 3, and Ohio State 4. I had Georgia at 5. In hindsight, I probably should have put them in there. But honestly, right now, like if I had to redo that prediction, I put Michigan probably at number 1. I really do think that they're that good of a team. Obviously things could change. Things have changed in the last month since that initial prediction. But I mean, they really have everything there. I mean, offense and again, the defense doesn't have that star type of player, which I think could possibly hurt them just a little bit in some of those matchups against powered offenses like Ohio State. But they have just solid guys all around. I think Junior Colson in particular, the off-ball linebacker for him, he's playing phenomenal football. I think he's one of the best linebackers in college football right now, in my opinion. Just a very smart, intuitive player. Great closing speed. I mean, he's just showing all the skill set to really be a good pro at the NFL level right now. So that's a player to get excited about. So again, I really do think that this is a genuine prediction. I think right now, if I had to pick a top team, it's them. Alabama, we've of course seen some vulnerabilities with. I still think Bryce Young's one of the best quarterbacks in college football, one of the best players overall, and same as with Will Anderson. But they almost lost to Texas. We've kind of seen this show before. Ohio State, I do think that I wouldn't say Notre Dame showed them the blueprint and how to slow them down a little bit, but I do think that they're a little bit more. I'm not going to say that they're normal, but they're not so much this an impossible to stop offense as we've seen. So I do think that Michigan's offense is kind of on that same level. Like I said, I think if I had to pick an offense, it might be Michigan's. And, Georgia's, we'll see what, as the season progresses. Obviously the defense is just the fact that they can get these like true freshmen and true sophomore to look like they're, super seniors out there, just with how technically refined they are. It's just an incredible testament to the coaching staff that they have there with Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann in particular, a co-defensive coordinator and linebackers coach for him. But I think Michigan's up there. If I had to pick, I think they're number 1 right now, and I'll go ahead and I guess I'll lock it in temporarily that they might be hoisting that trophy in Inglewood, California, in SoFi.
You know what? You were one of the few people that was out there saying Michigan is a legit contender, a legit college football playoff team. You were saying it at this time last year when everyone was saying, no, that's impossible. There's no way that you are correct on that. And yet you were right. You're the one who does all this grading, and you watch every team closely. So this is gonna excite, I'm assuming, just about everyone in the Michigan fan base. But who am I kidding? The Michigan fan base is only happy when they're unhappy. So I'm sure they'll be upset and angry. And so look at letters coming your way. Anthony Treash, thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. And we'll see if I'm right. I don't have the crystal ball or anything like that, but I guess that's just where
you had it last year, so I'm trusting it. Last year, everyone was saying Michigan was going to lose at Wisconsin, and you were like, "That's not happening," and you were super right. And
maybe I need to go buy a lotto ticket, pick the numbers, maybe get them all right or something. But yeah, thank you.
If you can do that, give me the numbers too. I'd appreciate it.
I'll tweet it out. I'll share them with everybody, but I'll be winners.
All right. Well, that's Anthony Treash right there. We'll be back to discuss a little bit about what he had to say back in a different location, the normal location, in a moment.
So that was pretty intense. Anthony Treash coming out there and saying, you know what? Michigan would be his number 1. I don't know if I would go that far, but I mean, this is a guy that's watched every game very closely. He's doing all that grading and everything, but I think his love of the offense and confidence in the defense says a lot as to what Michigan might be able to do this year. I'm very curious to see if that plays out. Like I said in the interview, he was the one last year, if you are a regular Locked On watcher or listener, that was out there saying in week 2 after Washington, he's out there saying Michigan is going to go ahead and they're going to beat Wisconsin. Not a lot of people were giving Michigan that credence. I think that was the one game I had Michigan losing last year, aside from Ohio State. Granted, I think the week of, I had bought in large part due to his confidence. I don't know that I think Michigan's better than Georgia. Right now, Georgia's everything, but he's right. J.J. McCarthy does potentially change the dynamic of what Michigan has from an offensive standpoint. Now, I want to see what it looks like in week 5. That's when I will buy in. Week 5, that still looks like that. Okay, now I'm buying in. If it's still like if Michigan goes and does essentially to Iowa what it did last year, except with JJ at the helm full time, especially given like what teams are not doing to Iowa. Not that these teams are a murderer's row by any stretch. I mean, these are not wonderful offenses that Iowa has faced, but Iowa's number 4 in the country in total defense right now. They've played South Dakota State, who had 120 yards. I can't look up what they've done otherwise. 313 yards from Iowa State in a 10-7 loss for Iowa. 129 rushing yards, 184 passing yards. Nevada did not score against Iowa, 151 total yards. Now, Nevada's played nobody to, even though they were, I mean, Nevada lost to Incarnate Word. So this is not a good Nevada team either. Iowa State has played an FCS team, Iowa, and Ohio. And as far as their total offense is concerned, I mean, they've done okay. I mean, 469 yards in week 1 against an FCS team, 463 yards in week 3 against a MAC team. And it's a MAC team that isn't particularly good otherwise. The rushing yards were only down a little bit. Their passing yards were down quite a bit. So if J.J. McCarthy can go on up against Iowa and really start slinging it, then suddenly I think we're having a lot more confidence in that offense. I think we already do have confidence in the offense, but I think it's even more warranted at that point. So I don't know. I just work here. I think that what Anthony said is tantalizing. It's a lot of faith in what Michigan brings to the table. He's parroting all of the things that I've been saying about Ohio State, essentially. I take it for what you want to take it as, but it sounds great. If for all of you who like to make graphics out there, even though I said, hey, keep what's on the show. That's more of me, like with my insider info. Go ahead and post all that, what Anthony said, all over the place. Get it out there. Have fun with it. Because, if it happens or not, we'll find out. That's the beauty of the sport, right? I can sit here and say huge degree of certainty Michigan is going to beat Maryland, but guess what? When everything comes to a head on Saturday, while it's probable that will happen, you never know what's going to happen. That's the beauty of college football. Anyway, all right, that's going to do it for us today, Wednesday. Our plan is to be back with another special guest if I can make this work time-wise, and that's the plan. We'll be bringing on an American treasure, the lovely American treasure from Full Ride. Allie Gearing will be joining us. She is a Maryland alum. She is a Maryland fan. Borrowing her from Childers and Neuheisel just to discuss what the Terps bring to the table. That's the goal for tomorrow. If it doesn't happen tomorrow, we'll get it in on Friday. Obviously, the mailbag will be Thursday. But that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for watching and or listening. We'll be back on Wednesday, as long as my back cooperates. Peace.